I'll get into all that here pretty soon, but let's see if I can get my slides advancing. Sorry about that. Oh, there we go. Got to get on the right screen there. So yes, I have an interesting appointment, I guess you would say. I'm a University of Wisconsin-Madison Division of Extension outreach specialist, and I have a collaboration with Iowa State University Extension and Outreach for this position to focus on small ruminants, so sheep and goats. And I am a sheep producer. I like to say as an adult, I have had sheep for 15 years, and I grew up on a diversified family farm in South Central Iowa, where we had dairy, beef, hogs, sheep, and a few goats, chickens, and you name it. So I have a lot of real world experience, and I like to help producers think through problems and help them think on how to be successful with their own small ruminants. Tonight I have a few objectives I'd like to cover. And I was talking to Lauren earlier, and I said each one of these objectives could be its own 5-part series. So I'm going to be skimming the top of a lot of things, but please don't hesitate to send a little chat in the chat box if you have questions, and we can maybe dive a little bit deeper into things as well. So first off, we're going to start with some goals and resources that I have for you. And I'd like you to help think about making your own goals so that you can keep on track with what you want to do. Then we're going to move into flock and herd management, and we'll talk about standard operating procedures to help guide your business. Small flocks, they tend to have lots of nuances that you can work through, talking about health, welfare, and to increase your confidence. And then we'll talk about nutrition and just the basics of nutrition, what's included, and what those components of a balanced ration look like. We'll just briefly, very briefly, talk it on marketing animals, but if you'd like to open up that section, we can maybe talk about that more. And then I'm really excited to talk about different breeds of sheep and goats to kind of get you thinking about how you can meet those goals with certain breeds. So that's kind of where we're going tonight. I'm hoping that we'll reach through all of it. But if not, maybe Lauren and I can have a part 2 sometime. So thinking about sheep, I love the sheep industry and the goat industry because it's one of those industries people can do basically whatever they want to, however they want it, and how it fits into their lifestyles. And not a lot of people know, but sheep are also dairy animals. They're meat animals, they're fiber animals, and we have a lot of youth exhibiting different types of animals. So the goals will help you determine what breeds and type that you will want to get, because even if you select on a breed, within different breeds, there are different types. And the same on the goat side. We have our dairy animals, our meat animals, our fiber animals, and those animals that are for exhibition. Not saying those exhibition animals don't fit into those other categories. They can be in both, but just know that there are different types and different breeds for different goals. I'm sure you've all heard of SMART goals, and maybe if you were a 4-H kid or an FFA student, you might bring back a little bit of traumatic thinking about having to start some goals. But I think it's a really good way for us to formulate a pathway of where we want to go. And if Lauren wants to share the first link that I created a Google Doc. And I don't know if I'm going to feel like I'm going to switch from my presentation into that Google Doc. But maybe I will try. Let me see if I could get brave. Let's see. Did it switch to Google for you? Okay, awesome. So I have created this goal sheet. And if you guys are familiar with Google, you can go ahead and open that. And you'll want to make your own copy. So you'll go to File and make a copy. When you do that, it will create your very own Google sheet that you can therefore start to type in and think about how these goals. There are kind of 2 ways we like to formulate goals. One would be a long-term, medium-term, and short-term. And that's one way we can think about goals. What are our long-term goals? Maybe that you would like to have not to have to work off the farm. Maybe you want to have full-time employment raising sheep and goats. That's a long-term goal. And then you set those medium and short-term goals to help you reach your long-term goals. So that's one way that you can think of goal setting. And another one, maybe you guys have heard of SMART goals, and I apologize for the the goals going downward. I probably should have had them going crossways. But another way to make goals are, think about SMART goals, being specific, measurable, attainable, relatable, and time sensitive. And you can see that I have created an example for, actually, I didn't create the example. I took it from this betterup.com. I thought it was a really good way to start thinking about how to make goals. So this one, for example, is I want to start a side business selling flowers from my farm. Well, maybe we could think about this as I want to start a side business selling meat products from sheep from my farm. And then we'll think about how are we going to get that? I will spend, at least 2 hours a day planning my business, and then we move forward, and then time sensitive, I will start making plans. Maybe you're wanting to start to make plans in May. So that's just a way to look through some goal settings. And I've created a place that you can go ahead and start working through that. So that is just a simple way to work through your goals. Now, the big thing is how to get back to my presentation. I'm hoping, awesome. Did it go back to the SMART goal? Yay, I did something today that I wanted to do that I was a little scared to do, but I tried and we did it. So that, I hope that you like those SMART goals and thinking about where you want to be, maybe next year at this time, maybe 5 years from now, maybe 10 years. Maybe you're just trying to get to breeding season, which we'll be talking about later this year. Another thing we could like to think about before we get started, and if you already have sheep and you've already passed these points, no problem. You can go back to goals. And as a seasoned sheep producer, I started out wanting to have my goal. And at the time, my great uncle, who was, well, let's see, 15 years ago, he passed away when he was 95. Math these days is hard, but he had sheep for a very long time. And my goal was to have a lambing percentage up to 3.0. So that means each ewe would have about 3 lambs per lambing. And he thought that I was crazy. And now 15 years into it, I started having quads and triplets. And I do agree with him. I'm crazy. And now I want to switch my goal. Since my kids have gone to college, they're no longer there to help me feed bottles and clean and all that. So now my goal is going to go back to a 200% lambing percent. So our goals can change. But anyway, if we want to think about how much time do we have to dedicate to our sheep or goat enterprise? Do we have 30 minutes in the evening? Do we have 3 hours? And that's brought me back to thinking about why I kind of got into sheep as an adult. I worked full-time on the farm with my husband, and I found out that I had a period of time from November after harvest till March when the cows started calving that I was kind of bored maybe. And so I thought, what could I fit into my time schedule from November to March to add some more income to the farm and to give me something to do in the winter. And I thought that remembered that I had liked sheep as a child, and I thought that they would fit really well into our farming enterprise at that time. So timing, I had the time to do it, and I find that I make sure that I have the time to do it now. Money is another resource, buildings, facility, and forages. And then as this lady on the end, I would like to say that she is those people that we have as a resource, our mentors, our resources for knowledge, veterinarians, nutritionists, all those people that can help you, extension, and our state specialists that we have. So all of those are great resources. And I also have a Google sheet that I'm not going to go to, but it's just a place for that you can write down what are your resources, and then you can see where are you lacking. If you're lacking in time, if you're lacking in money or facilities, how are you going to be able to fill those voids? All right, now we're moving on. Does anybody have, what are your questions on those first parts? Does anybody have a question? You can raise your hand, put something in the chat. If not, I will move on. All right, thank you. So flock and herd management, that's a really big part of having sheep and goats. And we're going to talk through a few specifics. Creating those standard operating procedures. I think a good thing for us producers on a small scale side, especially like this weekend, I want to go to my son's graduation. He's graduating from Iowa State, and I need to leave my farm for a couple days. And so how do I leave my farm in the hands of somebody who's maybe not as experienced with taking care of sheep? I have a wonderful help who does that, but I have to leave very detailed notes and messages for her so that she's able to take care of my animals. And then if we go on an extended vacation, unfortunately, one time we went on a vacation, I had a ewe die. So I had that all set up. So we knew who to call. My farm help knew who to call and what to do and how to proceed through things like that. So it's really important to think through standard operating procedures. And I do have a document that will help you think about what you need to include in a standard operating procedure. And as the same before, you can go to file, make a copy, and work through that. And some things, these are just very basic. We might not think about having these written down in a safe place in a binder that's safe away from the sheep or goats so they don't eat it. But just the name of your farm, your street address, the city, state, because if something were to happen when you were on vacation, does your farm help actually know your address? My children, when we moved to our home that I live at currently now, it took them a long time to memorize that. In an emergency situation, is everybody going to know the exact address? A contact name for you, a veterinarian's name, maybe the mentor who helps. So who, like if there's just a minor something, a sheep is hurt, stuck in a fence, maybe that mentor could come and help. And also sheep sure. And then knowing what animals are on your farm or what you are going to be in charge of. For instance, I have animals on my home farm and I have animals on a farm that I rent. If something were to happen to me, does everybody know where all my animals are located? So those are some things there. And then if we break down, and we'll talk about biosecurity here in a little bit. And then what is your protocol going to be for these things? And we're going to talk about some of these things in a later on, but this is where you can start writing down those ideas and keeping everything in one place. And this can be in a notebook that you carry around with you. It's a binder in the barn. Maybe it's a file on your computer, but let everybody know, especially if you're like my husband and in my situation, I'm the shepherdess. I take care of the sheep. He might help me with the bale here and there. So I'm actually the one, and if he were to have to know something, he could go to that book and work through that kind of stuff. Okay, now let's see if I can get back to the presentation. Awesome. So one big part of flock and herd management is the health of those animals. We're going to talk about a few different things, but one major component of healthcare for your animal is a partner that you have, one of those mentors, one of those resources, and that's your veterinarian. Actually, large animal veterinarians are hard to find, and they're becoming, we're just not losing them, but we are needing a lot of veterinarians, and to have a veterinarian that will care for sheep and goats is even harder to find one. So if you are still in the process of getting sheep or goats, or you don't have one, that's one of the first resources you're going to need to find as a veterinarian. Because of some of the rulings that came through last June, antibiotics for animals that are humanly, medically important are no longer available to purchase at, let's say, farm stores or through supply catalogs without a prescription. So one of those major things is you're going to have a veterinarian who is comfortable and knowledgeable with working with small ruminants. So, and then another part of that general ruling is that veterinarians have to be physically on your property at least once a year. So, we are promoting to have a herd health day. I know it's really familiar in the dairy industry to have veterinarians come to your farm and do what's called a herd health. It's better to call your veterinarian, have them come on a Thursday at 2 o'clock and set up a relationship with them, maybe some treatment protocols before you need to call a veterinarian at 2 o'clock on a Sunday morning and you have never spoken to the veterinarian before, because they're not going to be able to tell you, oh yes, dose them with such and such antibiotic and call me in the morning. That veterinarian has to know you, has to know your facilities, and has to know your animals. So in the VCPR, that stands for veterinarian client patient relationship. And obviously the veterinarian is the veterinarian, and they have to be licensed to practice in the state in which you and your animals reside in. The client is you as the animal owner, and the patient is the animal that they are treating. And that relationship is what I talked about before. It's that relationship of you each knowing each other, and that they feel comfortable giving you animal advice. Maybe it's telehealth over the phone. I know a lot of veterinarians do a lot of telehealth with their small animal producers because of the profit margins that we face with our small animals. We are less likely to call and have a trip charge because of those low margins that we do have with our small ruminants. We're going to talk about biosecurity a little bit, and like this is a 10-hour series itself, but biosecurity, and I'd like to steal maybe just quote a quote from one of my colleagues, Dr. Sandy Stitchin. She says that I'm going to get it wrong, but people tend to buy problems. So your biosecurity risk are those animals that you actually purchase and bring onto your farm. Or if we are exhibiting animals, it's when our animals are traveling back and forth that they are bringing disease pathogens back with them. And we can also buy parasites problems, and we'll talk about those in a couple of slides. 1 second, please. So being biosecure means that we're taking the precautions that we need to keep our animals safe from disease pathogens, whether that be those that are foreign animal diseases, such as foot and mouth disease, or our other diseases that we have in sheep and goats, such as CL, OPP, Johne's, parasites, things like that. And on the goat side, CAE are those things that are a major concern. Worms, sore mouth was a big problem this spring. I had a lot of calls for sore mouth, and a lot of these problems we just purchased them in by not making sure that we're purchasing animals from a healthy herd. Before we bring animals to our farm, we want to ensure that they've been vet checked and that they are free from these diseases. And then when we're exhibiting animals or borrowing breeding stock, it's all really common for a lot of small animal producers to share rams or bucks. And that's, it might seem like a good idea at the time, but it actually is a very big biosecurity risk unless you both producers have the same health status in their animals. So you may be wondering what the secure sheep and wool supply is, or the secure goat milk and mohair supply plan. These are plans that were created with Iowa State University and the Center for Public Health and Human Safety, which is kind of really odd group to think that helped create these, but it is, I don't know what I say. It's a protocol on how to keep your animals safe, cleaning and disinfecting, having signs up, looking at how diseases are spread. It's just a wealth of knowledge of how you can keep your animals safe. And having a secure plan will be really important if we were ever to wake up in the morning or hear in the afternoon news that foot and mouth disease has been found in the United States or even Mexico, Canada. We are going to be very, very, we're going to have a replay of COVID, but on the animal side, but 10 times worse. If that can give anybody an idea of what it would mean to have foot and mouth disease in the United States. It would basically shut down all movement of animals with cloven hooves. So the foot and mouth disease would affect sheep, goats, hogs, cattle, camelids, and deer. So anything that has to two little cloven toes like we know sheep and goats do. So we are doing our best to have surveillance at their borders and to keep any foot and mouth disease out of our borders. So I could talk about biosecurity on and on, but I'm not going to because we have lots to talk about. But if you're interested in creating a biosecurity plan or the secure supply plans, just let me know and we can work on this with you, or you can take a look through these plans. The websites are really great and we can get started. So like Dr. Standy Stitchin says, you buy in a lot of disease, but we can also prevent disease with vaccinations. And the main vaccination that both sheep and goats need is something we just kind of say is CD&T. That's, if you're around sheep and goats a lot, it's just a nomenclature, CD&T. And people also might call it Barvac, but that is a brand name. And then also may call it overeating disease, but your vet may call it enterotoxemia. And can I get a show of hands? Does anybody currently have sheep now? Like, can you use your reaction button to show me if you have sheep? Maybe. Or goats? Raise a hand. Okay, that'll let me, okay, awesome. So Jacob has some animals currently. All right. So I'm gonna just go a little bit into overeating, and it's caused by bacterium, Clostridium perfringens type C and D. And then we all may have heard of tetanus, which is Clostridium tetani, and it's the bacterium that causes these. These bacteria are in the environment on a normal day-to-day basis, and C and perfringens actually lives in the digestive system of sheep and goats. And what happens is these bacteria proliferate if all of a sudden our animal gets an overdose or too much of a high concentrate grain or milk. We see this a lot in our baby goats and lambs that we're feeding on the bottle and those that are creep feeding. And what happens is those bacteria are kind of just laying out in the digestive system, and all of a sudden they get a high influx of milk or grain and they start to overpopulate. And when they do that, they start to die off and they respirate and they give off a lot of toxins, which changes the pH of the blood of the animals. And it's actually a very slow, terrifying death that they have to suffer through because there is no treatment. I actually experienced this, even though my ewes were vaccinated a couple of Easters ago. I came home and I was like, oh, look, the sheep are out. And then in the back of my mind, I was like, oh, there was 150 pounds of corn and 2 bags of lamb grower in the lambing room. And so 6 ewes ate about 150 pounds of corn. And I lost 5 of the 6 of them. And it was a very slow, terrible death that they had to go through. So overeating is very, it's very sad. So the way we can prevent it is vaccination, and we will vaccinate our pregnant ewes 4 weeks or does 4 weeks prior to lambing. And we know that clostrinogenesis, which is the formulation of the colostrum, the first fluids that our lambs and kids receive from the dam. So they start to create that 4 weeks before they have their lambs and kids. And if we're vaccinating them at that same time, then they're able to pass that immunity into the colostrum. And then when the lambs and kids nurse, they are getting protection from the Clostridium bacteria. And so if we have vaccinated our does 4 to 6 weeks before that lambing and kidding, the doe is now covered or ewe is covered, and then their lambs are covered through the intake of colostrum. And then we will need to vaccinate those lambs or kids at 6 weeks of age, and then booster them again in 3 to 4 weeks. And now their immunity system should be able to help overcome those little influxes of high concentrate or milk. Not 150 pounds of feed, but those little times when they may have run out of a little bit of creep feed, or they're rushing to the feeder and eating a little bit more. And then our bottle lambs will need to be vaccinated earlier and more frequently, because even though the passive transfer is not happening for 6 weeks after birth, the milk is still putting through some of those antibodies, and they're kind of protected, if that makes sense. But if we remove those wattle lambs or kids, they're no longer having that natural source of milk with some of that protection. So they will actually need to be vaccinated at 2 weeks of life, and then boosted at 3 to 4 more weeks, and then perhaps another time, because their immunity system is just a lot more fragile than a lamb that is on its dam, and then also with those big influxes of milk that they are getting on the bottom. All right, does anybody have any questions about vaccination for CD&T? Okay. Next, we're going to move on to another area that I get a lot of questions on, and this could take me all night to discuss, but we are going to do just a brief segment on parasites. And if we look at this chart, and I'm basically going to talk about one of the major parasites that we are having difficulties with, and that is Homunculus contortus. Yes, we may have tapeworms, we may have other kinds of parasites, but Homunculus contortus is the one that is really giving us the most troubles at the point. And this is its life cycle, and it would be the same life cycle for any other strongylids or roundworms. The barber pole, Homunculus contortus is also known as the barber pole worm, if you've heard it in its common name. And it gets that name from the way it looks. It's actually a whitish to clear parasite, nematode, and its bloodstream is, you can see through it, and it kind of looks like an old-time barber pole. That's where it gets its name. And unlike most worms, this one, it doesn't, like a hookworm, it doesn't hook on and stay in one location. It actually takes a blood meal, leaves, and takes another blood meal and leaves. And so it's actually piercing into the abomasum of that animal repeatedly throughout the day. And you could imagine if your animals had thousands of these and they're eating 4 or 5 times a day, how many actual little piercing times they're sucking through that. And it's just amazing how much that blood loss can add up to with the meals that they take per day. Okay, so we start inside the digestive system in the abomasum of an animal, the host. And that is where the females and the adults are living. And they start to create eggs, which are then leave the body in feces, right? And those feces are laid on in the ground, in our pastures, and through the moisture in the pellets, I'm going to call them pellets, manure, and through the fungi that lives in these manure pellets, this is what they eat and they thrive on. And they will move into different stages of life. We call it L1, L2, and L3. And once the parasite gets to an L3, it actually encases its body and is no longer so susceptible to the environment. And then we hear that it lays in the environment and it moves up the blades of grass. And it does that by the movement of water, not so much by its own body, because these are microscopic organisms. They don't have any legs. They're not able to move up and down the grass on their own. It's just through the movement of water. And then they wait there until they are consumed by another animal and they start the process over. There are a few little tricky steps that the parasite has learned to do. So if we're thinking this happens and now it's going to be October, November, when that parasite is ingested, it now has been able to sense that if I were to go through reproductive stages and have my young laid out on the frozen ground, there's going to be no way that they can survive. So the adult worms actually go through a stage of hibernation called hypobiosis, where they are kind of stagnant there. And then once a stressful situation happens, such as lambing, then those parasites start to kick back up and start to be active. And so that is why one of the reasons it is recommended to check for fecal egg counts around parturition, which is lambing or kidding, because that's when those parasites have kicked back up. And so over the overusage of anthromylics, which are dewormers, we now have deworm parasite populations that are resistant to the types, actually 3 classes of the dewormers that we have available for small ruminant control. And that being said, now we have to think of other measures in order to battle Homunculus contortus. And one of the major ways we can do that is through pasture management and rotational grazing. So knowing that it takes from the time that the egg exits the body back to the L3, this could happen in little as 7 days. So knowing that, then we will know that we should not have our animals in the same pasture more than 7 days, because then they are reconsuming these parasites. Another thing that we have in our toolbox is that knowing that most of these parasites will perish in this stage up to 45 days. However, they can live in the environment 8 to 10 months, but most of them will die within 45 days. So knowing that, we can use the practice of moving our sheep or goats off of a pasture before 7 days and not having them return to that same spot in the pasture before 45 days. And if we can extend that to 60 days, that is even better. So I've just covered a lot about parasites. What are your questions? So some key things to remember is pasture management, and then also knowing what our fecal egg counts of our animals are. And so that is a way that we can test and see what the load that our animals have. And there are tests you can collect the fecal matter and send them into your veterinarians or some other places. Especially this place here is called the American Consortium for Small Ruminant Parasite Control. And it lists 3 to 4 universities that are part of a project that will do fecal egg counts on individual animals for around $5 a sample. So it's a really good way to figure out where each of your animals are individually. And then you can genetically select for those animals who have either 1 less egg count, or 2, maybe they have a high fecal egg count. However, they're able to suppress that population, and they're still able to continue to have a high body count, a body condition score, and be very productive. Our goal should never to have 0, because most of our animals, and especially the Katahdin breed, have found animals that actually can have high numbers of parasites within their systems, but they're actually to maintain perfectly fine metabolic systems. So it's interesting. There's a lot of work being done into that. And then also they're finding that the correlation between being able to have a resistance, we'll say a resistance to parasites, and they're also able to be resistant to other diseases. So that's some really good research that's coming out of West Virginia University that the researchers are doing there. And so they're really trying to see, because we can count fecal egg counts and correlate to that to their body condition, and then therefore we can select for better immune systems.
Okay. Jacob did have a question in the chat. Should you only use dewormer when needed, or should you get on a schedule?
It is suggested that we should only use it when needed.
And then this is just a personal question. So how often do you recommend doing fecal egg counts? Do you just make it a part of like your, you just test everybody before they lamb or kid, and just make it a part of your annual plan if you're not having any problems, or how often would you recommend?
Yes, so sure, make it part of your regular plan. And the thing that we have to remember is to check at those important times, like we said, lambing, And then another time, since a lot of us in Iowa lamb in the winter, we could check then. And then we want to check after, either before and after deworming. So if we've checked them and we decided we need to deworm. So we deworm, and then we'll give that dewormer its effective time. And then we'll test again to see if we have resistant parasites. Because if we have a parasite load, we deworm, and then a week later we come in and we still are having a high fecal egg count, then we know that our parasites are resistant to that type of dewormer that we used. Another thing that we want to remember, especially if we have had our sheep in a dry lot for the 6 or 7 months of the winter, we've gone through lambing and we're getting ready to turn out, and we've done a fecal egg count and we're good. Then we want to have them face what's called a challenge. So we turn them out into our pastures, and then we'll recheck to see if our pastures, if they're picking them up from the pastures. And if we're good at that one, then we can be fine. But if we start to see animals that are thin, are not breeding, then we could just check those individuals who are perhaps not staying in body condition. So with the fecal egg count and with a body condition scoring, keeping our eye on those two things, we can see those individuals who are naturally being able to resist or to carry that load.
Thank you.
Yes. Are there any more questions in the chat?
No other questions.
Okay, thank you. All right, and now we're going to move on to what I would say is one of the third biggest section that I get questions on, and that is hoof care, either whether it be sheep or goats. And when we talk about hoof care, what we're trying to prevent is foot scald and foot rot. Foot scald and foot rot work together. However, if you have foot scald, you don't necessarily have foot rot. They are controlled by different bacteria, and in order to get foot rot, you actually need 2 different types of bacteria working together and a wound in this interdigital part of the hoof. So one way we combat foot rot and foot scald is we keep our animals in dry areas. And I know this time of the year, it's really hard to keep animals in dry areas. And so what we do to do that is we do hoof care. Hoof trimming is one of those really good tools that we have. Because if you notice this hoof right here that hasn't been trimmed, it has this flap of skin hoof that's kind of grown over the other part. And that's a really good place for bacteria to grow and to stay, and they can grow and live there. And so if we do a proper hoof trimming, then we can alleviate that part, and then the bacteria has no place to stay and grow and multiply. Hoof trimming is something that a lot of people are scared to do at first, but once you do it a few times, it's pretty easy. It can be fun, I guess, if you like that kind of fun. Just if you are afraid to do it, like I said, a mentor is always good. But and there are a couple different ways to go about trimming hooves. This is actually the second way. I would call the first way is the way I do it, of course. But we'll talk about this way, and then we'll talk about my way. So as you can see, they are taking the hoof trimmer, and there are special hoof trimmers that are designed to do this work. And you will want to cut that flap that's overgrown on the other side. Cut that on both sides, and don't forget the inside, and then do the other toe. And before you get comfortable, you'll want to start with just small cuts so that you're not taking away too much. But then what you'll want to have is a hoof that looks like this, and it will start to grow the white. You'll cut down to this white place, and you won't want to cut so far that it starts to bleed, because now you've done the third thing that needs to happen for the bacteria. You have an open wound. So be very careful, and it's easier to take little pieces off and then work your way down. The way I like to trim hooves is I will start by making a cut across the top at the toe, and then I cut inward instead of cutting outward. But that's just the way it's easier for me. You could do either way. You'll just want to be very careful and make sure that you have the animal secure, because they will try to jerk away, and these nippers are really sharp, and you can actually hurt yourself doing that. This picture shows the goat is standing up. I've done it both ways, having an animal maybe tied with a halter, maybe somebody else is holding it, and they use your body weight to push it against a gate or a wall, works really well. And then also on sheep, sometimes we'll turn them on their rump, and we'll do that while they're laying down. It just depends on how big of a person you are and how big your sheep are. I have some girls that are way too big for me to reach all the way, and so I more or less pick their feet up like a horse, and that's what this picture is showing. Are there any questions? And then another thing that you'll want to do is make sure that you are sanitizing and cleaning your tools in between each animal, so that you're not spreading if you are having some problems with foot rot or foot scald, or even if you're not, just so that you're not spreading it. And you'll know that you have foot rot or foot scald. Foot scald starts before foot rot typically. And when you pick up that animal's foot, it has a really bad smell. And once you smell it, you will never forget the smell of that. And then foot rot, the hoof actually starts. I wish I had some pictures. I didn't think to put them in there, but if you just look up on the internet, foot rot in sheep and goats, you will find enough gory pictures for yourself. But it's definitely, and another thing, it normally happens on their front feet first, and so you will see them in the pastures, maybe on their knees, maybe limping, and those are the first signs, and you'll want to get ahead of it as soon as you can. And once you trim the foot, you will use a topical product. There are some over-the-counter ones you can use, and sometimes they'll be resistant, so you'll have to go a little bit higher on the formulations of what you use, but you'll want to work with your veterinarian. I'm going to be a little hesitant to give you recommendations on what to use. And then another way is you can do an antibiotic injectable, but I'm not really able to say that, so you have to work with your veterinarian. But there are some injectables you can use and some topicals that you can use to help cure the rot. All right, are there any questions on hoof care? And also keeping your salts and minerals. We'll talk about nutrition later on, but one of the basic things to help with their hoof care is having a good nutrition plan, and zinc is the one that's really good for hoof care. Moving on to welfare. So I'm just going to briefly go over the 5 freedoms that we as animal caretakers should give our animals. And the first one is freedom from hunger and thirst. So they have to have readily accessible to fresh water and a diet to maintain full health and vigor. Freedom from discomfort by providing an appropriate environment, including shelter and comfortable resting area. And on the terms of goats are naturally animals that like to play and jump, and so if we can give them places to do that, they are less destructive, and they like to have that natural tendency to jump and play. If we can get some tires or some barrels or some things for them to jump and play on, they're less likely to want to jump and climb your fences. Freedom from pain, injury, and disease by prevention of rapid diagnosis and treatments. Freedom to express normal behavior. So like I said, those to express their natural tendencies to want to play and to be with their own kind. And freedom from fear and distress by ensuring conditions and treatment which avoid mental suffering. And so as you work through these things, you will gain confidence and have a great time with your animals. But don't forget to find a mentor, join workshops. Experiential learning, that is a model that you do it, you think about how it went, and then you try to make changes and you do it again. Ask questions, volunteer for maybe a shepherd or a goat producer. Start small. I talked with a producer the other day, never had any goats or sheep, but was going to buy 100 ewes, and that made me a little scared. So start small, set goals, and then evaluate your progress. Okay. So now we're going to move into our nutrition side of things. And like I said, I'm going to go pretty basic because I'm not aware of which types of sheep or goats that you want and what your goals are. So we're going to basically go over basic nutrition. And then if we have more specific questions, I could perhaps answer those. So like we're animals and we like to eat, and we actually have to have the same similar things in their diet, our diet, and their ration. So carbohydrates, lipids, fats, proteins, vitamins, minerals, and the most important thing for animals is to have access all the time to fresh, clean water. Oops, I went too far. All right, so when we talk about nutrition and we talk about energy, you will see lots of different abbreviations. And I have started to list a few of those there. And if we got too far in the weeds, we could discuss them all. But one of the ones that you're going to see a lot about is this TDN, total digestible nutrients. And that's a way to measure the sum of the digestible fiber, proteins, lipids, and carbohydrate components of a feedstuff or diet. And this is how a nutritionist is going to talk about that feed value of a feed. And the higher the TDN, I like this. This is the one thing that if you can remember up here at TDN, the higher the TDN, the less they need, and the faster it will go through their system because it is highly digestible. And so that's one thing that you'll want to remember. And sources of energy are cereals and grains and byproducts. So corn, this list was taken throughout the US. So Milo, we don't usually use Milo here in the Midwest, or barley, but wheats and oats and byproducts such as gluten and distillers, alfalfa hay, corn silage, and molasses. So those are some things that we could use. I actually have used gluten and distillers and corn silage in my used rations. And after they learn what it is, they really like to eat it, and they really do well on that. Another source of energy is from fats and oils. And fats and oils contain 2.5 times more energy than cereal grains. And they're highly digestible, but we use them in smaller amounts. And we use them to increase the energy density, to reduce dust, improve palatability, and supply essential fatty acids. And some of those things that we can use are extracted plant oils, corn oil, such as corn oil, soybean, and canola oil. Because we no longer can use animal products in animal feeds, but at a time we used to use beef tallow and poultry fat. Another thing that's similar to a human diet is our animals need protein. And in a feed ration for animals, they get their protein from soybean meal, cottonseed meal, corn gluten meal, brewer's dried grains, sunflower meal, and field peas. So the amino acids and peptides that are absorbed into the body are used to build new proteins, such as muscle and milk. And so they use those from the 21 essential amino acids. And protein is a different form of energy, and lambs need protein to grow, and goats do too, to grow, and most importantly, to develop muscle tissue, because muscles mainly contain protein and water. And so what the animal does in the rumen, and we're not going to talk about the rumen, although we probably should, and that might be a presentation for another day, is going from when a baby is born, how it builds its rumen function. But the muscles, the rumen, and anybody's digestive system for that matter, breaks down protein into amino acids and then builds it back into proteins. And so they have to have adequate forms of protein in order to do that. And then the amino acids and their balance each other, and is a very important in lamb protein, lamb rations. And you'll notice when you go to the feed store or you ask a nutritionist what to feed lambs, you can have various types, maybe a 20%, 18%, 14%, or 12%. And it's based on the stage of production and what your lambs or goats need at that time. Usually baby lambs in a creek feeder will start out with a 20 or 19, 18%. And then as they get older, they don't need as much protein. And so we back them off the amount of protein, because if they get excess protein, it's just going to go through their system as a waste product. And here is just a list of the 20 common amino acids. We're not going to go through that, but they're essential for the building of those proteins in the body. And if we're growing meat lambs or meat goats, or we're making milk, we have to feed protein to get a protein. So another really important part of a diet are the vitamins. And vitamins can be either fat or water soluble, but fat soluble vitamins can dissolve in fat and oils. And vitamins are nutrients that the body needs in small amounts to stay healthy and work the way it should. Fat soluble vitamins are absorbed along with fats in the diet and are stored in the body's fatty tissues and the liver. Vitamins A, D, E, and K are fat solubles and are mainly involved in tissue development, calcium and phosphorus metabolism, antioxidant defense, and blood clotting. Vitamin A is essential for vision and reproduction. And another, vitamin E and selenium, we'll talk about selenium a little bit later, but those are two of the really important vitamins and minerals that sheep and goats need. And they usually get these from the diet. And if their diet is lacking, they can get a disease called white muscle disease. And our water-soluble vitamins are those that are actually dissolved in water and readily absorbed into tissues for immediate use. Ruminant animals are able to produce the B vitamins. However, we would give them if they had been sick or their rumen was not functioning at capacity. And that is the reason we would give, sometimes you have probably, if you've had animals for a while, you probably have given a shot of B12, vitamin B vitamin. And that is because their rumen has been depressed and not producing at the levels that it should. Moving into the macro minerals, macro meaning they need them at a larger amount. Calcium and phosphorus. And calcium and phosphorus kind of get a bad rap if we have male animals, because they can get urinary calculi, which are stones that trap urethra, and they are not able to urinate, and they can die from that. So we want to make sure that our phosphorus and calcium are at the right levels, and that is at 2-to-1 ratio. And calcium and phosphorus is for skeletal structure and development maintenance, lean tissue, and muscle contractions. The other ones we need are sodium and sulfur, zinc, copper, and iron. And you might think that copper is an unusual one to have on the list for sheep, because we all know that sheep have a copper toxicity, but they actually do have to have copper in a very small amount. So we just want to make sure that we're not overfeeding copper, and that we know where copper is coming from. If it's coming from our feeds, our concentrate, our minerals, or water. Another, the trace minerals, manganese, iodine, and selenium. And there the selenium is, and it's really important for muscle development in our fast growing lambs and goats. When they are very small, we know that they grow very fast, and they are depleting their resources of selenium and vitamin E. And they need that through their nutrition, and we can also supplement that at birth. I'm working with someone who actually had some iodine deficiencies and had some problems with that. And I was told that iodine is one of those minerals that some of the companies will leave out of a mineral if it's getting too expensive. So we want to make sure that we are checking our mineral supplementation tags and making sure that they have the iodine levels in there. So how do you know if your nutrition program is sufficient? Well, we can monitor body weight. And one way to do that is to have a scale. I actually just got a scale last year. So I've had sheep for 14 years without a scale. So it's not a necessary device to have, but I tell you, it was really handy when I was trying to figure out who to take to the sale barn 2 weeks ago. But one way you can determine weight is called a sheep tape scale. It's a special tape that you would measure around the girth of an animal and the length of the body, and then it will calculate an approximate amount of pounds. So those work really well. And there's also, you could use a sewing tape, and the calculation off the top of my head, I can't recall it, but if you need the calculation for just a regular measuring sewing tape, I can get that to you. Another way we can monitor nutrition for our animals is what we call a sheep body condition score. They also have these for goats. And we have to realize that some of our goats on the dairy animal side are going to be a little bit different than on our meat side. So just like a Holstein cow versus an Angus cow, we wouldn't want to use the same scale to quantify if they are in a good body condition score. But for a meat animal, the body condition scores are shown as like this, and we start with the score 1. When they are in really poor health and this animal is not in a good place, we'll just say that right there. And then all the way to body condition 5, this animal is obese and may have problems, either 1, breeding, or 2, lambing. And we'd want to take body condition scores during certain times of the production cycle. And if we begin the production cycle at breeding, we will want to have our meat females actually be breeding at a score of 3. And then we'll maintain them through 3 to 5 and at lambing or kidding. This is for meat animals. And then once they have gone through a lactation, you will see that they will lose quite a bit of body condition, and they may be down to a score of 2. We wouldn't ever want our animals to be below a score of 2. And then after weaning, we will want to bring her nutrition and her body score back up to a 3, 3.5 for breeding. And so those are the major times that we will want to do a body condition score: breeding, pre-lambing, lambing, and weaning. So those are just some, and so there's a few things that would cause an animal to go into a body condition score of 1 this low. 1 would be parasites, and 2 would be not a plane of nutrition that is keeping up with her requirements. All right, what are your questions about nutrition or body condition scores? Okay, seeing none, I will move on to one very short slide on marketing. So marketing is another place that I get a lot of questions on. And since it's such a broad topic, I just wanted to hit lightly on it. In the sheep and goat markets, there are a few different options we have. We have what's called the lightweight market, also previously kind of known as the ethnic market, market weights, and then I put auction versus direct because this is maybe a place rather than a market target. Our lightweight market is usually our hair sheep breeds. They focus around the holidays, Easter, El Dafid, some of those Islamic holidays. They tend to want a milk fat lamb or kid, one that is still showing that bloom from being fed milk, obviously, unblemished. That is one that's still intact with a tail. Some producers don't like to produce their sheep that way. So it's totally, that's again, what I really love about the sheep industry is you can do it. If you want a docktails, docktails. If you don't. And so, and then also that is around 35 to 60 pounds. If we're going to a traditional market weight, those are usually our terminal sire breeds, and that's what we're going to talk about next is breed selection. Our crossbred, our bigger wool breeds out west, they'll have been on the range all year and then come into a feedlot and finished out. So they are finished lambs or meat bred goats that are finished dairy males, and they're 120 to 160 pounds, and they're usually finished on grain. And there are generally 2 places to market your animals, and one is an auction and the other is direct marketing. And again, what fits your goals? Do you want to take the time to build a brand and a reputation and build a customer base? And another good thing about direct marketing is you can set your price. So those are some things if you would like to talk about, just give me an email or a call and we can talk about creating a plan. So we are now moving into the breed selection type part. And if I would like for you all to put in the chat box, if you're thinking or if you have sheep or goats and what breed is the most interesting to you. All right, so I see we have some two goat people, producer with Katahdins. So I will spend a little bit more time on the goats and the hair breeds, and we will go really fast through some of these other breeds just because I have to click through the slide anyway. So you should compare and contrast the breeds themselves and then the types of breeds. So I don't have it on the slides, but when I say type, I'm going for more of the show ring type versus the commercial type. And usually those two are different types of sheep. So, or goats, and the show ring are a little bit more fancy, and the commercial, they still produce lambs, and so do exhibition ones. So that's when I say type, that's what I mean. And there's a certain breeds like the Southdown breed, which have 3 different types, a baby doll, an American, and more of an English style. All right, so first of all, I'm just going to breeze through the sheep milk breeds, East Frisian, Lacane, Awasi, Asaf, and Icelandic. I actually had a chance to go to a sheep dairy on Monday, and it was a great experience. So yes, we do milk sheep, and they make fabulous products. Milk, not milk, but cheese, soaps, and yogurts. On the meat side, we have a few breeds that are more prevalent probably and easier to get your hands on if you were looking at some meat breeds, but Suffolk, Hampshire, Southdown, Dorset, Texel, the hair breeds, Katahdin, Dorper, White Dorper, and some crossbred. So those are the ones I'm just going to be briefly covering. Suffolk breeds is normally known as the blackface ones. I don't know if I need to go through all of these. I don't know. The Hampshire, they're also a large blackface breed, but you'll notice that they do have some wool on their face and legs. Someone said to me at a show once when my kids were showing Southdowns, we had them shearing, and somebody said, we spent 20 years to get the wool off their face and legs, and now here we have the Southdowns. But the Southdowns are actually one of the oldest down breeds, and some of our other breeds originated from the Southdowns. If you do see, I on the slides have their mature weights and their wool qualities, because even though we say that they're meat breeds, we can use some of their wools in certain products. And the wool market, that's another story for another day. But another breed that we use for meat production is Dorset, and they come with polled or horns, although I believe polled is more common. Textile is an interesting breed. It's not one of the breeds that are from England or the British breeds, but it has a large, like I say, double muscle characteristic, and it can see that it has a lot of muscle packed in on a small compact body. So a lot of these breeds that I have shown you are what we call a terminal sire breed, and we use them for their meat characteristics and their carcass traits. Moving on to the hair breeds. Dorper and White Dorpers, they were originated in South Africa in the 30s. I've been intrigued about hair sheep for a while, and I actually purchased 2 White Dorpers at the county fair last year. So I'm pretty interested to see what they do and how they grow. And I was a little shocked when my husband has been taking care of the ram shed. And they're in the ram shed in their separate pen. And I walked in there and I go, what is wrong with them? Well, they were blowing their coat. And so it was really fun to kind of pull it like I do my guard dogs. So now I have 3 to take care of their hair, but they're really known for their muscular bodies and getting up there for that lightweight market. We can get them to market pretty quickly. The Katahdins are really becoming more popular, especially in the southern regions of the United States because of that parasite resistance that I had talked about before. Another characteristic that they are being known for is their ability to graze in solar fields. So that's another place I think we will see a lot more Katahdins in the future. They were actually developed in the US. There are only a few breeds that were developed in the United States, and they were created to have mothering abilities, high prolificity, meaning lots of lambs born, and the fact that you don't have to shear them. And then you can also have crossbred. So I showed you purebred stock, but a lot of our commercial producers like a characteristic of one breed, and they cross them together to get a certain type of sheep. And they are used usually a maternal breed. Sometimes the bigger producers will use a maternal breed, such as a polypay, a Finn, maybe it's a Katahdin, and crossbreed them with a carcass trait terminal sire ram, such as a Suffolk, Hamp, Sapdown, or Dorper Textile. So that's how we get some of our bigger breeds.
In your
Yes.
experience, is so like for cows like Angus and like Wagyu are like marbling, like they're obviously two different kinds of marbling, but like they're known for their marbling characteristics. Is there a sheep breed or sheep breed that would be kind of above the rest in terms of marbling and carcass?
The way that lambs deposit meat is different than cattle. So lambs tend to deposit meat in between muscle segments, not in the meat like a beef cattle does. So another characteristic of the Katahdin was to be lean. And so we like to develop our carcasses that are lean because they can put so much fat on the outside of a muscle or in between the larger muscle groups. So I hope that answered your question. It's more on a nutrition and a breed thing. And there is a lot of variance in between the breed itself. So I can't just say one breed because breeders have bred like certain strains for that way. Yeah.
Yes, that
But
does.
we can measure them with ultrasound, or if you're wanting to know how your carcasses are doing, then try to work with the processor to see how your carcasses are actually grading. And we don't sell lambs and goats the same grade and yield that we do on beef cattle. And then if you are on the show side of things, you might see a breed. It's not really a breed, it's a type of sheep called wether sire. And those producers are looking for a nice showy type animal that has good carcass characteristics. We also have sheep that are known for their fibers, and the characteristics of fiber are color, crimp, stable length, micron diameter, spinning count, and luster. And some of those breeds we're probably familiar with. Merinos are a fine breed. Rambouillet or Romadale CBM. These are actually my sheep. Another couple of more common or fibers that are liked by fiber artists are Cormos and Targies are popular. And then now moving on to breed selections for goats. And on our dairy breeds, we have Alpine, La Mancha, Nigerian Dwarf, Nubian, Aubers Holly, Saanen, Sable, and Toggenburg. And on the dairy side, they have gone to having a dairy goat that looks like a dairy goat no matter what the breed is, but the breed still has its breed characteristics, such as its color pattern, its size of structure, such as the dwarf Nigerians. They are held to the same structural standards as an Alpine, but they are going to be smaller. And of course, the La Manchas have no ears. They have very little tiny ears, and the Nubians have the long ears. So those are where their breed characteristics come in. The next several slides I have are taken from the linear appraisal of goats. And I kind of contemplated on showing this, but then I got to realizing that some of these characteristics that they're actually all these characteristics that they're showing on the dairy goat side is how to select a good animal, no matter what type of animal you're selecting. And if you look at these, it's kind of like a Goldilocks effect. One is either too far left or too far right, and we are looking for the animal that's in the middle. And if we look at form and strength, you can see that the animal on the left is too thin and narrow, and the one on the right is too wide. And the same thing with the dairiness. If we're looking at a dairy animal, whether that be sheep or goats or cows, but on the dairy goats, they tend to want them to be higher at the shoulders. And if we look at this rump set, I think is really interesting and really important to note that this can be taken into consideration for our sheep and our cattle. And when we want a slight slope at the angle is more appropriate for our birthing females instead of the upswing in the back, because if we think about the main purpose of this region is for birthing our animals, and if our angle went up, the birthing fluids are going to have a hard time finding their way out. And going on to the width of rump, we want to make sure that she is adequately large enough to, one, birth an animal, and two, to carry the udder. And this rear leg set is interesting, and we can think about it for all types of animals. We don't want to see an angle that is too straight or too much. We want just right. And again, with the fore-udder attachment on our breeding goats and sheep, and that's one of the places that we can make a lot of improvements on our sheep side, is to looking at the udders. And these are some more pictures of udder characteristics that I'm not going to go into a lot, but we can get just the notice just by looking at these and thinking about where do our animals fit in and what can I select for. And then on our meat goat sides, I know a few of you said that you had boars and Kikos. We can also use Mytonic and Savannah and Spanish goats for meat selection. And we will just go through some of these slides. And if you notice, I have a QR code for most of the breed association websites. And those are great places to find mentors and people to connect about and ask questions to. And Mytonic goats, you may know that those are the fainting goats, and they were actually developed in Tennessee. And yes, people do eat Mytonic goats. And Savannah, that's an interesting, another large framed, well-muscled goat. And then we have our fiber goats, cashmere goats, and Angora goats. And this is my place there. You can go for all the information that I covered. A couple good websites that I didn't cover on the Sheep 101 from Maryland Extension, the American Lamb Board, American Sheep Industry Association, Iowa Sheep Association, and the American Goat Federation. So moving forward, I think we have a really good positive outlook for sheep and goats in the US, whether it be solar grazing, brush control, or our meat products to meet the demand that we have. And if you'd like to connect with me, you can follow the group of us on Facebook or follow our website page. So thank you, and I hope I answered some of your questions or got your brain thinking about different things that you can do for your starting your small flock or maybe a large flock. And feel free to contact me with any questions via email or phone. Thank you.
Jacob had one question. He said, do you
Yes.
run your sheep with your cattle?
I have one cow, and so I don't think that I can say, but it is multi-species grazing is a thing that people are trying to take a look at, and we're really thinking that it's a good idea. One, for parasite control, and two, for best usage of our forages. So we think that every mouthful that our cow is consuming is one mouthful and parasites that our sheep are not consuming. And plus, they like to graze different plant species. So biodiversity is not only good for our animals, but for environmental services.
And Jacob, if you're interested in multi-species grazing, next month in June, Patrick Wall will be talking about multi-species grazing in our webinar series. Just a little plug. Did anybody come with any other questions that we haven't answered yet tonight? All right. Seeing none, thank you so much, Carolyn, for your information. This was a very excellent slide, and I'm very excited to see your presentation on reproduction in August.
Yeah, I'll be excited.
I hope everybody has a great night, and hopefully we'll see you in June with multi-species grazing.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.